I nearly lost a sister to this. She lost her twin pregnancy because of an abusive man. And it got me questioning the system. Why did she not speak to someone? That was really what triggered my research.
Claire has a PhD in domestic violence and is passionate about women empowerment.
You can't tell a woman whose husband is extremely violent, an alcoholic, who is also an antidepressant, that, oh, go back and submit to him, while 2 nights before nearly killed her with a knife. That's not counseling. That is actually leading someone to slaughter. And it's important that whilst you seek help, that you seek help in the right place. 111 is a good place to start.
When Claire is not fighting for women's rights, another overwhelming obsession of her life is her love for art.
I tend to say that art found me. No one captures art as well as a woman.
Claire believes very much in the power of faith and family as she reflects on the influence of her mom on her art and her life in general.
My mom, it's hard to speak about her in the past. My mom was my greatest cheerleader, and she would always say to me, you can become the best of whatever you want to be.
I'm Yoruba, and there's that quote, an adage that says, a river that forgets its source will dry up.
Boga. My mother's people will say boga, and what that means is that is correct.
What is that message that you're trying to pass across when you create this beauty?
Number 1.
Academic, artist, and social justice advocate. This is Claire Ogah, and this is Critical Factor.
Claire.
Hey.
Thank you for being on Critical Factor. It's good to have you here.
Thank you for having me. How are you?
Absolutely fine. Okay. Absolutely fine. And the first time I came across your profile, the art that jumped off the pages is unmistakable.
Oh, wow. Thank you.
Tell me about that. Tell us how you fell in love with art, and I mean, how come that's become such a major part of your person?
It's crazy. I tend to say that art found me, but weirdly, it's always been there. But I recognized it at some point that it was part of my being, whilst being part of my becoming as a person. So I think when I distinctively knew that art was part of me was during my doctorate. Long hours in the library. I was known, the cleaners knew me in the library because 6 a.m, I was still stuck there, and 1 a.m, 6 the next morning, they would find me in the library. But in between data analysis and just, reading through stuff, I realized that part of my understanding or part of my comprehension of what I was reading, I'll take time to scribble my thoughts. It was weird because my research was around culture, gender-based violence, and medical practice. But what caught my attention and what I kept scribbling digitally, because I had a phone that had a stylus, was the women that, I thought about, the women, that were in the setting of the place I had, the area I had data collected, right. So I was just absent-mindedly sketching that, and some of the things that stood out for me was the colors they were, the way they carried themselves, the grace and all of that. So I tried to catch that in my art. I didn't call it art then, mind, because my head was in the research I was doing, but absent-mindedly, that was my way of understanding what I was doing. So yeah, got me sketching. Then randomly, one day, I shared that on Instagram, and I got loads of DMs. Where did you get that picture? Who drew that? What software did you use for that? The word software caught my attention. I'm like, why is this dude saying software? And I go on his page, he's got over 10K followers. I'm like, okay, so that means I'm doing something. But I said to myself, girl, focus, get your doctorate out of the way and revisit this later. But I didn't stop sketching, just got on doing that, but never did anything about it till, I had finished, my doctorate, got into work and all of that. Then at some point I thought why don't I, do something about it? Because documenting who I was becoming and the things I was learning along the way, especially around the culture I was in and the in-between culture I find myself now, became super important for me to represent that in my art. And I found out somehow that no one was doing it the way I was doing it. While there were a lot of beautiful things around me, but I just thought, this is me. This is me. Why don't I capture that and possibly share it with whoever is interested?
Interesting. So your art was essentially self-taught.
Yes, I am self-taught, yes.
Impressive. Mm-hmm. And I think what strikes me when you say that is the fact that so many people sit on great things without even knowing it. Because like you said now, you had subconsciously stumbled on something so big without even knowing it. Someone else was calling it out and saying, oh, well, this is amazing. I mean, and in that regard, would you say how much has that played a role in your outlook since you started to get into art, and how has that affected your personality and the way you kind of, just your general outlook?
I think what it's done for me really is I've become very fearless. Do you know what I mean? That might not be the right word, but I've just become, if it comes to me, just do it. Do it. Maybe you fail, maybe you wouldn't fail, but just do it. Do you know what I mean? I am now very conscious of expressing myself, per time. Right. So if I'm feeling this way, explore that and see where that gets you. Because that's how I became an artist, just going with what I was feeling. I was feeling the data, but in the scribbles. I don't know if that makes sense, So now, if I feel something, and if for instance, I'm a spoken word artist, that came about some of the things I had gone through, losing my mother, and I remember documenting, on journaling, right? Journaling, death and dying, the culture of mourning in Africa, especially, the tribe I come from, and how it's so expensive, and how personal things become public. I didn't appreciate it. So because I did not appreciate it, it got me to a place of writing. So one of the random days I shared it with a friend. They're like, oh my God, you're such a good spoken word artist. I'm like, what? I'm not, that wasn't what I was going for. I was just expressing myself. But that's gone on to strongly become a medium, that I express myself now. Do you know what I mean? But I never thought that. And I've always done that, mind. But I guess when it became really was when I lost my mother, But I've always done that. I've always expressed myself in writing. If I felt something, if I'm angry about something, if I'm heartbroken, it all goes, do you know what I mean? I scribble about it. And hence the art, the data was so intense. And the women got to me and their fashion, having not gone home for a while, just observing the vibrancy of the color, reminded me of my childhood and things like that. So I'm like, oh my God, so that,
when you say the women, I'm curious, what women are we referring to here?
Right. The women I saw again, of Nigerian women in the part of Igbo land that I come from, which I am thankful that was where my research was based. So going back home to Nigeria, it's weird when my second home, going back then, just looking at them with a different pair of eyes, I would say, I appreciated the color. I appreciated the composure. Do you know what I mean? I appreciated their resilience. Do you know what I mean? Because all I was thinking is, with all this pain, how come people are dressed this colorfully? Do you know what I mean? Like, it got to me, and I thought I needed to document this. You know, so
You have that sentence on your website where you said art is female.
Yes.
What does that mean?
No one captures art as well as a woman. Nobody does it. Because there's a lot of, again, forgive me if I sound a bit jaundiced, but there is a woman puts everything into whatever she's. I've got a present for you.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, I have a present. So maybe this will answer that question.
All right, why not? I'll take it.
Right. Open this. Tell me what you see.
Let's see. I'm excited about this one. Let's see. Oh, wow.
Well, you said art is female, so I thought to show you.
Oh, wow. So let me show that we can see that. This is Lagos.
Yes.
And yes, I see.
Okay.
The woman in her colors, eh?
Yes, the woman in her colors. You see how vibrant that is. But again, I'm a cultural storyteller. So during the pandemic, I'll tell you the story behind that.
Yeah.
During the pandemic, I think with the news and the media around the pandemic, it did hit me that if this went on for a while, I might not be able to travel to see my mom and dad. And that got to me. So one of the days, again, I am a Christian, and I come from a family with very robust spiritual practices. So growing up, my parents were Catholics, and part of what we did was we went for this thing called Okamwede in Igbo language.
Okay.
Okamwede means evening church, but as a child, what intrigued me about evening church wasn't what the priest was saying. All of that for me was gibberish, but it was the colors that the women wore. The colors. So during the pandemic, I missed home so much. I remember seeing one day, and the word evening church in Igbo came back to me, Okamwede, and I started having flashes of the women all dressed up and all of that. I had this auntie that would come to visit then. Auntie Nkechi loved fashion. But she's a much older woman, but she would always tell us of her time in Lagos. You know, she'll come with the stories, how they'll get on the Damfo, all dressed up in parties and all of that. Hence, this is Lagos. Because she will tell us about how overly crowded the Damfo bus was with women going for stuff.
And yet all dressed up.
And hair all dressed up, you know. And that got me thinking about the resilience of the Nigerian woman, you know, and all of that. And I tell you, a man wouldn't have captured that. I did. So art is female.
This is really beautiful, though.
Thank you.
Thank you. I mean, I love this very much. And
I hope you've got some space.
This is definitely going somewhere very special. You can count on that. And I know you've already touched on your upbringing a bit and that, but twice you've talked about your mom and how special was she to you? And God. What role did she play?
My mom, it's hard to speak about her in the past. You know, but for the sake of time, she's in the past, as in she doesn't exist in this plane, but she's very present, you know, as far as, you know, I'm concerned. But my mom was a very special force. She's a creative polymath. You know, I remember growing up, her Bible had always had abstract bookmarks of drawings that she had done. You know, she would do those drawings and use them as bookmarks in her Bible. You know, at a point, she was a scientist before she decided to switch to become an artist, and she became, a language professional. She became a French professor. But I remember as a child, I've always dabbled into art. I did a lot of ceramics. At a point, I had turned Dad's garage into my ceramic studio and stuff like that. And I'll make very crazy stuff. My mom was my greatest cheerleader. I will show her that, and she'll be like, "Oh, this is good. It's quite UGLY, but maybe go work on it." You see, you're laughing. You see that. But for me, the way Mom said it, I never thought UGLY was a wrong word till I go back to my studio and I'm thinking, oh, she said it's lovely, but it's UG. I'm like, oh my goodness, how dare, yeah, I know. So I go back to her room and then she's busting out laughing. She's like, no, that is me encouraging you. That wasn't so good, but I couldn't get, so she was just super encouraging, and she would always say to me, you can become the best of whatever you want to be. I remember one time I had gone to my mother's room and I said to her, Mom, do you think I'm a dumb child? Do you think I'm not smart? And she says to me, who told you that? Never you think you are not smart. Never you think that about yourself. And that stayed with me. That was super encouraging for me. I never forget that. She was my greatest cheerleader. Her words still keep me going, till now. Oh gosh, yeah, bless her.
When we were discussing before the show started, we're talking about my father as well.
Yeah.
And so I can relate with what you feel, because my father was such a strong force, in my life as well. And like you said, sometimes it's hard talking about them, without still feeling all those emotions. Yeah. So I get it. Yeah. But if there was one thing you could say you miss most about her, what would that be?
Oh my God, our Sunday morning conversations and our Bible studies. The last Bible study I had with my mother was on the letter to the 7 churches, the book of Revelations. She was an astute believer of God's word. She would talk about, my mom. Yeah. It took me a while to delete her number from my phone because I used to be in the food poverty sector, and I remember every Thursday, because that was my busiest day of the week, she would always call me in the morning to say, oh, I know today's going to be busy for you. Make sure you don't lose your temper. Understand that the people you work for, understand that you're doing this for the king and the country, never for an applause. It is for a cause and not for an applause. Because I had shared with her, when I was getting into the sector, some of the things that, God had spoken to me about, said to me, you are not doing this for anybody's applause. You are there for the king and the country, not for anybody's applause. So do not do it looking for a thank you. Yes, if the thank you comes, take it graciously, but do not look for the thank you. Do this for the king and the country. So she would always call me in the morning and unfailing in the evening, how did your day go? And in between, she would share very weird smileys and things. At the time of her death, she was 75. And I used to say to her, Mom, this is age inappropriate. You need to, do you know what I mean? Like, she was just using WhatsApp, like a Gen Z. I'm like, Mom, this is age inappropriate. Where do you get the smileys from? I do not even have it on my phone. Do you know what I mean? Like, she was the sweetest person ever. Honestly, she taught me kindness. She taught me kindness, I'll say that again. And she taught me generosity, those two things. And she did influence my art as well, because I remember one of the things she did, oh my God, was she fed women. So she had this thing that she did for 17 odd years. feeding women during August, every August unfailingly. She would feed women, in a particular region in the state. And at first, people thought she was doing that because she wanted to get into politics. But giving their status and stuff. But she was like, well, I do not come with cameras for this. I do not need cameras for it. I just came to feed the women. I came to give them clothes. I came to give them food. And she did that, So some of the stories she will share with me, I created a body of work called August Meeting, celebrating the women, that and the stories she shared with me.
Amazing.
Whilst those pictures were sort of abstract, but then, every picture had a story, inspired, by my mom and the things she shared. The same thing with Okamwede, because in Okamwede, I now documented the stories behind the fabrics, because I don't know if you know African culture, everything in our culture tells a story.
You're literally going there, because I was going to come down to that. That was literally my next question about, you are the CEO of Overly Couture now, which basically is, I look at all of the art that you have in there. There's that intertwine between fashion, art, narrative.
Yes.
And so my thought as I looked at it really was, what inspires your designs and what is that message, that you're trying to pass across when you create this beauty?
I want people to know that Africa is multifaceted. African art is also multifaceted. At some point, it appeared that the art that made it to the media was art around pain, art around slavery, art around, it was just ugly. I'm sorry. Art about the ugly things that had happened, in Africa or Nigeria, as it were, or perhaps, my tribe, so I wanted to document happiness in my art. I wanted to document my generation, the fashion. I wanted to document how we were, we were art, we were our clothing presently, so that was important to me. But whilst doing that, I didn't want to lose the stories that my grandmother had shared with me, or my mother, or the things I learned, because I've always been involved in community work, back home, about the fabrics that we wore, why we wore them, what it meant, and all of that. So if you notice, I use a lot of indigenous fabrics in my art. Because in Igbo culture, I am Igbo, by the way. In Igbo culture, fabric, there's every fabric has a language. There's a hidden language, to every fabric. Every fabric, every clothing sends a message. For instance, we've got a fabric called Iwaka Abinum. Iwaka Abinum just means, as a bride, it must be in a bride's box. If you want to marry a woman from Igbo culture. Iwaka Abinum means, have you come to marry me empty? Do you know what I mean? So that means that fabric is symbolic. A bride has to have it, and then you've got the ones that queens wear, that queens adorn themselves with. You've got the ones that you wear in mourning. You've got the ones that you wear in baby dedications and stuff like that. And when I lived in the West, in Oshobo, I also learned that Oshobo has the river goddess, that they worship. So you see the batik, because I learned how to do batik and all of that. I learned tie-dye and all of that. So you notice that the Oshun worshippers, they've got a special print on their fabrics. Whilst there's a lot of modernization, so there's an influx and infusion of people just mix things from the west to the south. So it's almost like there's a buffet intertwined, and all of that. But then I also do not want us to lose our individuality. Whilst I love the cohesion and the unity, do you know what I mean? But I also think it's important that we document that and don't lose that, as we keep our history and, document it. So for me, that was important, and it's important in my work.
Give me 30 seconds to interrupt your interview very quickly.
The reason I make these videos is because for far too long, the African story has been told by other people but us. And so, at Critical Factor, the core goal is to spotlight African excellence wherever it is across the world. And if that is something that resonates with you, please support the channel by simply subscribing to the channel and, of course, sharing this so that other people can see it. And without saying too much, let's get back to the interview. You just touched on two very interesting things. One is the fact that you are trying to use your art to take us away from the UGLY.
Yes.
That's saturating the
Mom,
media.
that's you. Now he's picking that up, UGL.
But also the fact that you're talking about the individual identity that the diverse cultures of Africa have.
Yes.
Now, one of the big things we then see a lot of people struggle with is you're living in a world where everyone is talking about assimilation. You move to a foreign country and everybody's talking about assimilate. Now, how can the African diaspora stay authentic and true to their cultural roots and heritage, you know, while still trying to blend in? Because then what we're looking at, should we all wear African, or should we not pick up an accent in a bit to be authentic? You know, if you get my point. Like, I'm just saying,
I get it.
How do we find that balance? How does the African diaspora not lose its identity, its cultural roots, and yet still be relevant and assimilate?
That's a very interesting question, but the way I see it is in fusion, right? It's important when you, there's this analogy I want to give you. You must be a Christian, I'm sure you are, right?
I am.
Now, there's a story in the Bible that I love so much. It's the man Moses, right? Moses.
That's my baptismal name.
Oh, excellent. So Moses never lost the fact that he was an Israelite, but he learned, you know, the ways of the Egyptians. Do you know what I mean? But he never lost who he was. So he assimilated the culture, but he never lost who he was. And whilst doing that, I'm sure that some certain, you know, things were chipped off him. Lose the bit that, you know, lose the African bit that is negative, assimilate the good bit, but don't lose the good bit of who you are. That is me trying to share this in very plain lingo, do you know what I mean? And not sound overly academic that, you know, is lost in translation. Just pick up the good bit, but keep the good bit of who you are. Because what I keep seeing, and it hurts me, is when people move here, you know, and all they copy is all the wrong bits, and they lose the good bits of where they are coming from. And that for me, you know, worries me. You know, it does worry me as a person. It
almost seems like people are shy to associate with their culture sometimes, isn't it?
Which is sad, isn't it? It is sad, but I also think it's because I think it took me leaving here to appreciate my culture. You know, so, well, because I became curious. I wanted to become more African than I was before I moved here. You know, I sort of realized how different I was, you know, whilst I introduce myself as a citizen of the world, but I also understand that my roots, my Nigerian roots, you know, so it became important for me not to lose that, not to lose the good bits of my heritage, you know, whilst I also enjoy and welcome the Jordaness. My Jordan in you. Honestly, yeah. So I feel like it's doable, but we need to, as a people, to be intentional, which is one of my words, really, and one of the ways I live my life. We need to be intentional. A lot of people, unfortunately, in diaspora, they are moved, or they are drawn, they are pushed by the search for greener pastures. So I'll do anything and everything to to get what I want, even if it means losing who I am, So that's the thing. And if the foundation is destroyed, what then do you become? So
who are you when you lose that identity?
Who are you when you lose that identity? So that's the thing. Whilst there should be room for evolution, that's important, However, it's also important that you know who you are even as you evolve.
Something was coming to mind, and I don't know how to say that without. That would be a tricky one, because I don't know if we'd end up using it or not.
No, that's okay.
But it's something from, I'm Yoruba, and there's that quote, an adage that says, "Odo to bag gbagbe orisun e, agbe."
Me bo.
I know, I'll translate. Don't worry, be patient. I'll translate.
Okay.
Essentially, what that means is a river that forgets its source will dry up.
Boga. My mother's people will say boga, and what that means is that is correct.
That's it. And I think that captures what you just tried to explain there. Yes, evolve, but never forget whence you came.
Never forget.
Yeah. Let's dive into that doctoral side of you.
Oh. Do you know, it's so weird, because sometimes I actually forget I have a PhD. Interesting, yes. Let's talk about that.
I know you did do your research, I believe, in gender-based violence, domestic violence against women. Do you think that space gets enough recognition at this point in terms of the kind of focus it deserves when we talk about domestic violence?
Ooh, no. Unfortunately, no. Number one, it doesn't get enough funding that it deserves, given the amount of, impact gender-based violence, whether against women or men, has on the society, at the moment. I feel that there should be done. Do you know what I mean? It does affect every facet of the society, especially the family. So I do think there should be more. There should be more exposure, media-wise, financial, support for services, around gender-based violence. Currently, it's super important.
I actually, when I looked through some of your work, I actually noted here and said, I know you're focused on women, but I mean, men are not excluded from this, right?
No.
And I think also sometimes the context or the definition of domestic violence is vague. Could you explain that to us, to the layman? What exactly constitutes domestic violence?
Okay, let me put it this way. Domestic violence, right? When you say domestic, we're talking about the home. So in the home, there's a relationship either between, given the world we are, either between a man and a man in a relationship, or a man and a woman, or a woman and a woman, where there's fighting, and where there's war. That's a huge word in this, but where there should be no heating, basically. I'll just put it that way. So, I don't want to use any big words, but if there's fighting, if there's heating, if there's emotional abuse, that is violence against, a woman or a man or a male, and that's unhealthy, which influences a lot of other areas in a woman or a man's life, especially the health, and most times does lead to death, in the long run, which we've seen, several times. So that is just the way I'll put it. If you are hitting your wife or you are hitting your partner, whoever your partner is, that is, violence. Yeah, that is domestic violence.
And to that person who's watching now, if they are a victim of it or literally trying to get out of such spaces, what would be your advice to them?
Please don't be shy to call 111. do not be shy to call 111, especially for people of African descent, especially our families in diaspora, where there's a lot of cultural barriers to using the services here. Sometimes we think about what people at home will say. You call police for your husband. Now, wow, that place where you dey don't spoil you. It don't spoil you finish. You no call us for house to settle am. You call person for outside. Unfortunately, things like that have led to people losing their lives both ways. I have been in conversations with men and women who are domestically abused in their homes, and the barriers have been, what will they say at home? And it's led to a lot of mental health issues, which is super dangerous. One had to be rescued from suicide. I was privy to that, and it was just the toll, the emotional toll it takes on people. So whilst I was trying to speak Pidgin, and I know my Pidgin is horrible, but the point here is, please seek help. Please seek help. Your life is more important. And the other thing is counseling. Do you know what I mean? Counseling is, while sometimes I question the sort of counseling people get from some of our religious institutions, I am an advocate of professional counseling. I remember losing my mother. It was a difficult time for me. One, people mourn differently. I never wanted people to come visit me and talk about, oh, you lost someone. So I didn't appreciate it. So I closed all avenues of that. But I remember one of the times in prayer, the Lord said to me, you need to seek professional counseling. And I did. So I got in touch with NHS talking therapy, and that really helped me. Now, I never talked about counseling as something, but I actually didn't realize I was depressed. Do you know what I mean? I did not, and so I'm an advocate for talk to someone.
Seek help when you need it.
Seek help when you need it. Talk to somebody. It does help. Talk to somebody. Not every church is dodgy, but then over the years, I have heard some things from places that should be trusted spaces for women, that would have led, if those women took the advice, thank God, I had the opportunity, or they had, I was in their ears saying, right, whilst I think this is right, but at the moment, if you do this might lead to this, so we don't want to risk that, You can't tell a woman whose husband is extremely violent, an alcoholic, who is also an antidepressant, that, go back and submit to him, allow him into the house, whilst maybe 2 nights before, this is a real life story, 2 nights before, nearly killed her with a knife, and you tell her, you need to go back to submit, that's for me, that's not counseling. That is actually leading someone to slaughter. And it's important that, whilst you seek help, that you seek help in the right place, so 111 is a good place to start. And like I advise everyone, don't shy burns get not, that's Jody, honestly, be bold, ask for help. There's no shame in asking for help. Another thing, which is my passion, is to dispel this shame around, violence against women, thinking it's your fault. No, sometimes it's nobody's fault. Sometimes the fault might just be the misunderstanding, but then don't stay there and die, basically. That's
a very good one. And I thank you for sharing from the heart on that, honestly. people need to hear it.
Yeah,
you know,
it's personal to me because I'll say this, I nearly lost a sister to this. She lost her twin pregnancy because of an abusive man. And she's well educated, Harvard educated, PhD, you know, she's got, yeah, so all of that. And it got me questioning the system, you know, why did she not speak to someone? You know, so that was really what triggered my research.
Interesting.
And so I'm like, right, this is one of the things I'm going to be vocal about, you know, and I want to talk about it in a way that it's accessible to everyone. I do not want to be seen as this girl who's got this PhD and she's got all the fancy words to talk about it. No, I want to share about it in a very basic way that it would only take a dog who's deaf not to understand what I'm saying, you know, basically. Because that near-death experience for my elder sister, it was a wake-up call, you know, for me. So, yeah.
All right. As we gradually wrap this, you are big about women empowerment. It's something you champion a lot. What is empowerment to you? What is empowerment actually? Because sometimes the reason I ask that, just for context, is we have a tendency where people are, again, borderline, I mean, the whole pursuit of feminism that, again, becomes, you're losing what it means to be a woman in the name of being empowered.
Yes.
So what is empowerment to you, and what would be healthy empowerment, you know, for a woman?
I think healthy empowerment for a woman will be where she has a voice, will be where she is comfortable expressing herself, not hiding who she is or what she wants to become. I see myself as an empowered woman because my mother or my parents gave me the liberty to pursue, you know, the things that were inherent in me. So empowerment for a woman is where she's giving the liberty and the resources to become who she is or who she should be. That for me is beyond the politics of feminism, beyond the politics of this or that, you know, because for me all of that is noise, but basically this is what empowerment is.
So to that minority woman watching and listening to you right now who is struggling to find their voice and feel empowered, what will be your message to them?
Don't give up. Do not give up. It's a hackneyed expression that where there's a will, there's a way. But that is just the reality of it. Do not give up. Your passion has a way of, you know, directing your path. If your passion is to find your voice and own it, one way or the other, you'll find out that somehow you'll be in that path, you know, one day, honestly. So don't give up. Do not give up.
We have a closing tradition where we ask guests to tell us what they believe has been the critical factor to their success in their life. And so if you could pick one thing as the critical factor to the success of your life and your journey as an empowered, you know, woman of color, what would that be?
Not giving up. That's just been the critical factor. Being constantly on a street called hope, no matter what. Because I've had challenges, you know, but I remember being in a vision, and in that vision I kept hearing a voice, do not give up your joy. So that period, pandemic, people were not going out, NHS was always in my ear. You're vulnerable, you can get COVID like this, you know, so do not even look out of your window because you can get, it was crazy. But guess what? I was working because I was considered a frontline worker. You know, my food bank grew. We had a 585% surge in service users and all of that. I was in so much pain. I was, MRI appointments, the whole 9 yards. But in all of that, that was when my art picked up. That was when the Lord was constantly inspiring me to do things like Ukambwede came up. I was sketching, all of this was happening. I was in so much pain. I think at a point I was on codeine, cocodamol, and what's the other one? Valium. I was on all this medication 4 times or 5 times a day, hospital prescribed. But what kept me was that word, joy, and not giving up. In 2021, I had the opportunity to exhibit my artwork, a bit of what's it called? Great Hancock Museum. The day I was doing that exhibition, I also had a talk that same day. Newcastle Uni picked up on that, and I ended up facilitating a workshop with them. So loads of opportunities. I also taught in a university. All of this was happening. These were all moving parts. I was in pain, but all of this was happening. But in my head and in my spirit, I had that thing. I'm on a street called hope. At a point, my GP was like, you are not meant to work. You shouldn't be working. They'll look at my records. They're like, you mean, you could see their face, and I'm just sitting there laughing. Because for me, it was also very crazy that I'm doing all of this and I'm going through all of this. But in my head, do not give up. Do not give up. Out of the eater came forth meat. Do not give up. And out of the strong, complete that for me. Do not give up. So, don't give up. Do not give up. Sometimes I need to rest, right? But then I get up. Don't give up, Some days are good. Some days are really bad. But then don't give up. I'm on a street called hope.
No, thank you so much. And I mean, that's the core. Do not give up.
Please.
No, but thank you so much for being here. This beautiful art, thank you for it. And
that's an A3 print, so
lovely.
An A3 print.
Appreciate it. And just to complete what you asked me, out of the strong came something sweet.
Yes, that's right.
All right, brilliant. Sure. But thank you for being on Critical Factor, and we'll keep following your journey and your story, and keep inspiring, keep doing what you do.
Thank you.